Clubhouse.
Mothers can endure anything. A child's first act on this planet is to tear his mother in two, rip her apart from the inside. What emerges is a life completely dependent on her, for food, warmth, comfort, protection. The child will speak a language devised solely of wails and murmurs and furrowed brows, and the mother understands this language the instant it is spoken. The mother is consumed and driven by a love that is indescribable to those who have not experienced it. It is not the butterflies of infatuation. It is the instinct of love.
Welcome to Pod Clubhouse's coverage of 1923, a prequel series to Yellowstone. This is Caroline.
And this is Mike. Tonight we're discussing episode 5 of season 2, the start of the back half of the season, Only Gunshots to Guide Us. Tonight's episode was written by Taylor Sheridan and directed by Ben Richardson.
Just a community note, please join us on Facebook in the Yellowstone 1923-1883 and 4-6's discussion and news group to discuss 1923 and the whole universe of Yellowstone shows. You guys, we assume you've watched this episode, so if you haven't, please hit pause because we're not going to go step by step, but there will be spoilers. So please go watch the show and come on back.
Motherhood and parenting. Hello, Caroline. How are you doing?
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Good. We're starting the back half of this season 2 of 1923. And again, another episode that's going to give some people nightmares. And I feel like this show needs a trigger warning before every episode nowadays. But I want to talk about the theme of motherhood because it came up, or we can enlarge it because there's some good runs his horse parenting action, which actually hits on stuff we talked about last week. What is the show saying here? The Elsa clip that we played to begin this episode talks about how from the moment a child is born, it rips the mother in two, and yet the mother devotes everything, not out of butterflies of infatuation, but from the instinct of love. And we hear in the episode Mary, who's the Irish immigrant with her 2 kids sharing the cabin with Alex, and we hear Alex eventually stand up for herself at the end of this episode, talk about several times, when you're a mother, there's nothing you won't do for your child. We hear Runs His Horse say, as long as there's land, we're going to keep running. We're not stopping. We're not going to stop unless we have to stop running out of a basis of protection. What are we getting from this episode? And did they do a good job of kind of conveying the limits that a parent's willing to go to for their child? Is that a theme that you feel in this series altogether?
Yeah, I feel like there's generally no limits on what parents will do for their kids. I always find it few and far between, and we all kind of cock our heads when we hear of people who turn their back on their kids or betray their kids in some way. I feel like we all are like, what's going on with that one? Like, that parents fell off the rails. I think that this is accurate, and I appreciated that they included Runs His Horse because I think it is a parenting thing. I mean, I didn't know as many involved dads until I had met you, and you are an extremely involved dad. And so I don't think it's fair to just leave it as motherhood. I think it has to be parenting for sure. And I do think there's nothing that most parents wouldn't do for their kids.
Are we supposed to take anything from the fact that there is no ranch tonight? There's no Kara or Jacob. Kara being a stand-in mother figure for the majority of Spencer and Jack, her nephew, her second nephew. Would it be second nephew once removed? I don't know. John Sr., who's passed away now, and Spencer, who she basically raised from pretty much a young age, or at least early teenage years. And now, Jack, John Sr.'s son, Jack, she's kind of a mother figure. We don't see her in this episode. Elizabeth, who we end, last week's episode, she's newly pregnant, and we find out, and there's jubilation there. A mother-to-be trying again after a painful miscarriage, but not in this episode where they have made a pointed effort to talk about motherhood. Are we drawing anything from that? Is that a specter of doom? Is it a message, a warning? It's weird. I don't know that we've never had an episode that didn't take place somewhere on the ranch, at least a little bit.
I feel like we have to move our chess pieces forward. We've talked a lot about, okay, we're starting to converge in the same places and we're starting to get our travelers like sort of grouping up a little bit. We needed a night without the ranch to move our people forward who are all traveling. We've got plenty of traveling going on and plenty of obstacles to deal with. So I was completely fine with the episode focusing on that. How about you? Did you miss the ranch?
I did. I not that I missed the ranch, but I thought its absence was notable. Maybe not in the moment because there's a lot of heavy emotion going on in this episode, but as soon as the credits were rolling and I was watching them because I was trying to get down some of the names of the newer people we saw in this episode or were introduced to in this episode, it hit me. We didn't see the ranch at all. And then it felt kind of weird. I did feel kind of weird about it. And then I started, because I was thinking about motherhood and two of our principal female characters not in this episode. We're talking about parenthood. 4 parent figures to actually be and 2 who are surrogate parent figures not in this episode. So it did strike me actually as a little weird. And that's why I started wondering, I was like, is the show sending us some kind of message here? Because this is the first episode of the back half and these episodes tend to be statements, right? The episode 4 and 5 of an 8 episode season tend to, especially the episode 5s, tend to start setting the table. Now, you're right. We had a lot of stuff with Alex on the train, and we have a lot of people converging in Amarillo. I would venture to say this is probably the most Bozeman, Montana residents gathered in Amarillo, Texas, probably ever in the history. I mean, when Mammy Fawcett, Marshall Fawcett, she's rattling off the number of people from Montana who are currently in the Panhandle. I was like, that's a lot of people currently kind of gathered there. So I'm going to put a pin in there just so if it does become a thing, we can look back at this and say, well, we did talk about it. But yeah, I did miss the ranch to circle back to it. Obviously, this episode, like I said, probably should have come with a trigger warning, and we're going to have to talk about it. So trigger warning or, just a warning also. We're going to be talking about the sexual assault that Alex goes through on this train tonight. I'm curious how you felt the show on the whole handled it.
I think that they were realistic in that we discussed this a lot in previous episodes about the lack of recourse that women have. That in this particular case, I feel like she didn't have, much she could have done, basically. I am so thankful for the goodness of Paul and Hillary, and I'm so glad that they were willing to speak up. This was echoing her friend Jennifer helping out on the boat. And I definitely think it was one of those things where you hold your breath and you hope people do the right thing by speaking up, but you never can tell if they're actually going to go through with it. I have to say that just for my own self, I don't think I could have stood there. Every survival instinct, I don't think my mind could have gone through all the steps to say, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to cause a problem. I need to eat, blah, blah. I don't think it would have done that math fast enough to keep me from literally jumping away from the person. But then I don't know what my next move was. So I have no idea what you're supposed to do in anything like this. It's so insane. And he has the upper hand in the situation and it's just all frightening. I mean, it must be difficult as a male viewer to put yourself in, her shoes or anything. I mean, how do you view things like that?
I kind of just watch in abject horror. I taught self-defense classes as part of my Taekwondo training for a long time. And I was thinking about something you said, I don't know if it was last week or it was the week before, and it's been in my brain since you said it. And we had talked about it a long time ago off mic. You and I had talked about this, about the proliferation of female or women's self-defense classes in this country. Just assume we are starting from the point of view of women will be attacked. We just assume that that's going to happen. And so we need to arm our women, or we need to train them to protect themselves. And like I said, I've taught those classes, and it tears me inside in a very deep way. In my career, I've worked with a lot of women who are victims of domestic violence, trying to help them get divorces from their abusive husbands. For whatever reason, I've been in the world, and I've felt a pull towards it. And maybe I feel like I'm making up for the male gender, and it's kind of guilt ridden, or I had a mother and two sisters. I mean, and I grew up with my grandmother. She raised me, basically every day. There's something inside of me that pulls to it and calls to it. And I have very visceral reactions to this. I had a real trouble watching. As soon as he said no stockings, my blood just turned cold. I was already nauseated from putting her, forcing her hand into his crotch the night before to clean up the coffee stain, but also yelling at the screen to never fill a saucer cup that's in the air. But that's besides the point. But it's when he said no stockings, my blood just went cold. And I kind of had to watch this between my fingers because, it's funny, your reaction of, I think my body would jump away. I kind of had the opposite reaction of, I think in that position, I feel like maybe I would have been like her. I would have frozen.
Yeah.
And you see it on her face. And I gave her props a couple of episodes ago, and I have to again. I think Julia Schläfer is killing it this season. If she doesn't get nominated for an award, I think for the season, it would be a travesty. She is showing so much pain and hardship on her face. And she goes through all the emotions in this scene, from the realization to what's going to happen, to the horror, to when it happens. Then the bubbling of the violence and as she explodes. And I gotta tell you, I was applauding and I was hooping about her beating the ever-loving shit out of this guy. I just wish more was done to him. The horror at it, her reaction to her violence was also spot on in the moment. I think that is a realistic view. This was horrible. Everything about it was horrible, but it felt realistic to me. It felt born of real experiences. And I think it also really hammers home everything that comes after, right? We don't see him being put in a makeshift brig. We see her being put in a makeshift brig.
Right.
And everything that came after felt very realistic to not only 1923 or 1924, but I don't think we're so far-fetched from that in 2025 either, sadly.
So let's talk about how we think it serves the story, because it definitely introduces Paul and Hillary into Alex's life. They become much more important, even beyond testifying on her behalf and being willing to answer questions and completely saving her. But now she's going to actually go with them. And I, upon first watch, I think was so relieved and so grateful that they spoke up and they came forward and they were willing to do anything, not just like, oh, that's too much trouble to answer questions later. I'll just tell you what I saw now and that's it. But offering her a place felt like, okay, this is so nice of them. They're so great. Now, when I was going back through our notes and I was talking to you about this offline, I was thinking, why upon thinking about this again, why am I why are you so stupid to my own self? Why do you not have any amount of trepidation that these people, though they're being very, very kind, what if this ends up being like human trafficking of the 1920s? What if there's something more to this? I mean, it's so rare that you just meet nice people who have all good intentions and nothing's going to happen to Alex. Suddenly, I am filled with dread, to be honest with you. As much as I wanted the Paul and Hillary thing to only be finally, we're seeing some good people in the world. This feels very scary. Where do you fall on this? Are you, yay, Paul and Hillary are great people who are going to really help and we're finally going to move forward? Or is she going to run into some sort of other bizarro circumstances when she goes with them?
Let's listen to this Winnetka clip from the end of the episode and then talk about it. Because I think the episode goes out of its way in a very short amount of time to lay a foundation here to maybe not make us worry. But I think we have to examine it. Let's listen to it and then see what we think.
A train station is no place for a young lady. Neither is Chicago, for that matter. Come with us.
Go with you where?
Winnetka.
Where's that?
It's not far. It'll remind you more of Oxfordshire than America, I assure you. It seems a bit of respite from your adventures might be needed.
You've seen what happens to men with wayward hands around me.
I shall keep my hands firmly in my pockets. I assure you.
This is the last scene of the episode for Alex. Obviously, the episode ends with Pete and Marshall Kent and Father Renaud, but this is the last scene of Alex, and she gets up and Hillary puts her arm around her. I think you can see her mouth, "You poor thing," and then she's talking to her, and Alex looks very shell-shocked as they walk out of the station, and Paul is in front of them, and their man with the bags is in front of him. I think the show, starting from the first time we hear them talking before Alex even comes over to them, I think that's important because I think it's setting them up as characters, not in relation to Alex. I think it sets them up a little bit like the viewers. I think they set them up as the viewers who also watch these things happening to Alex. And Hillary is mouthing to Paul, do something when the coffee man is violating her. On the train platform, Hillary is telling Paul, he's like, "It's not our business. What can we do?" And she's like, "I'm going to make it my business." And she inserts herself and insists. And I mean, we will play the clip in a second of where she insists. And it's only because she insists and then Paul backs her up, supporting what Alex's side of the story is she set free. And here's, I think, the most important thing for me is that for the first time, Alex herself, she is wary of the second location, which is something you and I talk about all the time. Never go to the second location. But she's wary for the first time.
Which, for all of you Mulaney lovers, that's an Oprah thing from a long time ago. Never go to the second location was completely something that we talked about forever. And then Mulaney made jokes about it.
Street smarts. Street smarts.
I've just stopped you for just a second because you played that clip and you've got, we all pick up on the other little subtle cues, right? Didn't you hear the music go like, duh, when they started talking about her to go with them? Didn't you hear the music play that?
It didn't sound, let's listen to it again, because it didn't sound sinister to me. It sounded more like strings of like hope. Let's listen one more time.
Strings of hope? Okay, well, we're hearing two different things.
Maybe not strings of. Let me listen to it. I wasn't paying attention. I was listening to the words, so let me listen one more time.
A train station is no place for a young lady.
Okay, so at the start there, she had been crying. This was actually her second breakdown. She was crying to herself in this episode. It was the second time we've seen her breakdown ever, and it was the second time in this episode. Both times happened in this episode. She's crying to herself. So that first note is the end of her crying, of the music when she's crying, and then Paul begins to speak.
A train station is no place for a young lady. Neither is Chicago, for that matter. Come with us.
Go with you where?
Winnetka.
Where's that?
It's not far. It'll remind you more of Oxfordshire than America, I assure you. It seems a bit of respite from your adventures might be needed.
You've seen what happens to men with wayward hands around me.
I shall keep my hands firmly in my pockets. I assure you.
Yeah, those strings are lilting to me at the end. They're lifting up.
I'm getting both. But right before
forlorn.
it lilts, it does a string that hurts my belly.
I think it's because that's where she's at, and she is wary. This is what I'm saying. Alex, everything that's happened to Alex was her not being aware of the surrounding before it happened, not being prepared for Ellis Island, not being aware or prepared for the bathroom before she gets on the train. Now she is wary. Now she's suspect of the outstretched hand. And it's also a visual thing too. He's looking back at Hillary for, am I doing this okay? Am I being consoling? And it's interesting that Hillary sends him to speak, because you would think woman to woman, Hillary would be the one that you would be for the more immediate connection and bond and maybe even safety. But she sends Paul to speak. And I think he's not presumptuous. He immediately understands her position. And yeah, those strings at the end, they start to lift for me. And I think so.
Yeah,
I think it's the part of.
I heard a little change, but.
Because it's silent until she mentions the hand.
Okay,
says,
but we have to remember who the writer is here.
Sure.
And we have to remember our other storylines.
1,000%. There has to be...
It can't be in a vacuum. Like
no.
Who of all of these characters that we've met have had such an amazing, wonderful moment where someone really took care of them, where it lasted for more than like a second? Because my thought was like, oh, well, Tiona had Hank. Yeah, but that lasted for a second. Before he was,
but we believe in karma, Caroline.
Away.
We're big believers in karma, though. She's due.
I totally am.
She's due even for a respite. He doesn't say, I'm going to put you up.
I hope so.
Right? He doesn't say, we're going to take care of you forever. He says just a respite from your troubles, just a pause. And maybe that's all we can count on here. But I feel good about the fact that she, at least temporarily, will have some shelter from the storm of the horrors.
I'm really crossing my fingers, you guys. I'll be real honest. If you're a writer who's willing to write all that Whitfield prostitution stuff, you've now scared me. You've scared me. You've scared me into thinking bad shit is going to go down if you go to people's houses and you may never get out again.
So for people who aren't aware, and I was looking it up too, just getting my notes together. Winnetka, Illinois is a village just north of Chicago. It's 16 miles north of downtown Chicago. It's one of the wealthiest, not only places in Illinois, but is one of the wealthiest villages in the entirety of the United States. To give you a sense of it, anyone who has ever seen Home Alone, that very large, wonderful house that we always wonder, what did Mr. McAllister do in order to afford that house? That Home Alone house in real life is located in Winnetka. It just sold for $5.5 million in January of this year. So very affluent area. And I think everything we saw from Hillary and Paul, the fact that they were even in that dining car, I think indicated wealth. So I agree with you. It was hard not to think of Whitfield and Lindy when watching this scene. But I'm going to also say that this is the other side of it too. And I think
it would be nice.
I think the show has actually gone out of its way to show that British people are not Americans. And the British people that Alex has come across have actually tried to help her, like Jennifer, who came to her in her need, even though it put her out, and Paul and Hillary, who had no reason to other than having made a bond of a countryman over the devaluation of the French franc, which was a wonderful conversation based in fact in the De La Huerta failed revolution, which was a real thing that had happened, though it happened 2 weeks earlier in March. There was bonding there. And that's what I'm saying. I think the show actually went out of its way to set in a very short amount of time, groundwork to not only show a bond between these three countrymen, but also Paul and Hillary. Hillary hysteric. I mean, it's a very serious scene when Coffee Man is raising his hand up her skirt, but in the background, Hillary is flipping out and she's mouthing Paul, 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 and nodding and stuff. I think they did a lot of groundwork in a very short amount of time to say, breathe for a second, because it's going to be okay, at least for this little bit. And I want to give a hat tip to Janet Montgomery, who plays Hillary, and Augustus Prue, who plays Paul. I think for very little screen time, I think, assuming this works out well, I think are going to be instant kind of fan favorites.
Please put me in the category of healthy skepticism of this situation, because it may not even be Hillary and Paul. It may be somebody who crosses their path societally or something that leads to some insanity, because it wasn't technically getting on this train that was the problem. It was the man who was in the dining car, So it's will the problem actually be going to Paul and Hillary's, or will, because she makes that decision, she runs into somebody else now who creates more problems for her? I would love to think that they're going to become her guardian angels and somehow give her the money, get her the rest of the way with the agreement that money will be wired back or whatever. I want to think that. Lord knows this girl needs a win, but I am skeptical. It's just not what the times are.
I want to play just a little quick palate cleanser, and if this doesn't make you love Hillary, then I don't know what's going to make you love her. This tickled me to no end. I have the longer clip, but we don't even need to play it because it doesn't add any value. this is the clip for you guys to pinch and play for people, especially when you're snacky.
Yes, a cookie. Bring us a cookie. Cookies.
Cookies? I've played it like 9 times. It makes me laugh every single time.
It's very Mary Poppins-y.
Cookies. She's just so like amused by the whole thing. And so, and he gives her a very nice big tip, which is, I was happy that the ladies that Alex was working with, the other serving ladies, I thought she was going to get all jacked up. They were going to take her money or throw the stew on her. No, they tell her, the bread will soften, stick it in the stew. Yeah, you can keep your tips, just don't let the manager see. Like, it worked out so much better for her. So, it's little things that absolutely do not outweigh the horrors that she goes through, but there is some kindness that she is experiencing here. I want to talk about her conversation with Mary about America and what it takes, because Mary says my favorite word of this season, grit, and whether or not, and ask the question of whether or not Alex has it. But let's finish the sexual assault side of it. So there's 2 clips that we have to play where Alex speaks up for herself and men in charge are not inclined to listen, or not going to do anything that they absolutely don't have to do to help her. Let's play the first one.
I know what they do to people like you. They go mad like a wild animal. They treat you like one. They cut the front of your lobe out. Then you sit in the garden and stare at fruit for the rest of your sorry life. Then good riddance.
He attacked me.
I've seen plenty of women take a beating. Not one of those beatings ended with a man losing all his fucking teeth.
With his hand. On me. In me. He raped me with his hand. Is that not a crime on your trains?
It's not up to me now. It's up to the Chicago police.
I thought that was significant because the conductor goes from assuming she's mad, like he's talking about lobotomy, to hears her story, and it looks like the manager believes her, or at least he has the decency to look abashed and look down. And then the conductor's, his story switches to, well, it's not my problem now, it's the Chicago police's. Fuck you, dude. Fuck you. Like, you're not, you don't even want to listen. And I get it. This is a customer. I'm sure he's very wealthy, but you just have a story that you want to believe. But the significance of that clip really for me was Alex finally breaks. Caroline, for all she has been through from the time Spencer was put off of the boat at the end of season 1, we have not seen her break. She has kept moving forward, tried to keep her spark, tried to keep the humor, tried to keep the bite about her. That howl into her hand in that dumb makeshift brig almost broke me listening to it. It's visceral. It cut right through me.
This has been insanely awful for Alex. I feel like every step of the way, I'll take it back a little bit what I said about that there was like no one being nice to anybody, because there certainly were. I mean, like you mentioned the fellow waitresses that were like showing her how to handle the food. But then also, I mean, just the fact that the train manager like let her, figure out how to work for food. And
a really nice kindness, You can't let people starve.
And
right.
Giving her the shoes and all that kind of stuff. That was all very kind. It was all really extra stuff that people didn't have to do, and they were trying to help her. And so I don't want to make it sound like nobody has offered moments of kindness. It's that it seems to never stay. Like, it's like she gets like a little bit of kindness. Like
it's
maybe
just little amounts of kindness in the face of
being given information, like put the money in your shoe, and like now everybody saw where you kept your money. Like those are all little things, but like then he doesn't mention like you should have bought the food package and that kind of stuff. Like there are these little parts that it's like it's good for a little bit, but it's like it doesn't quite get her where she needs to go. And that's what worries me, is like, did Paul and Hillary use up all the good that they were going to do her already?
Listening to you, because I've been trying to figure out how to like say it, and I'm going to go back to last week. It's little teases of spring, and then she gets buried with snow, right?
Yeah.
The manager lets her work for her food, can't have you starving, gets her the shoes after being on her heels all day. Paul and Hillary, little teases of spring. Then she has to wipe the guy's crotch with a napkin. Then she gets sexually assaulted standing there pouring coffee in the morning. Then she gets in trouble for doing something about it and taking matters into her own hand. That's buried with snow. So it's just these little nibbles of kindness, and then she gets walloped. She needs a break. I'm hoping we find a break. Let's listen to the last clip. This is where she's talking to the Chicago cop. And we can wind up Alex's part of, then we have to talk about her interactions with Mary, but let's finish the sexual assault part.
You won't even ask to hear my side?
Do that to someone's face. You don't have a side. And I don't care how many girls he's got on the side.
Girls on the side?
Up and turn around.
I will not. I have rights.
Stand up and turn around, or I will turn you around. Have it your way, lady.
What about my things? My luggage, I need my things! Officer, I was witness to the assault.
Yeah, well, I'll get your name and your address after we load her up.
Officer. Officer! You are arresting the victim, sir.
The victim?
My husband and I both witnessed the man place his hand beneath her skirt as she poured him coffee. He groped her privates, and she defended herself.
You tell anyone this?
I told the conductor.
He's not your boyfriend.
I am married, sir, and not to that scoundrel.
The man says you're his girl.
Well, officer, I think you should consider that a rapist might also be capable of lying.
You both saw it.
Yes, we did. I was prepared to intervene, but the lady was quite adept at intervening on her own behalf.
He doesn't want to believe her, this cop. Even after all of this, he reluctantly removes the handcuffs from her and is like, well, we're going to go see what the coffee man says now. Like, dude, that story doesn't even make sense that she's his girl. She's serving on a train that he's a passenger on. That story doesn't even make sense.
That's what I would say. I'd be like, I'm sorry, you think that I am his peer, his girlfriend? Yeah. And he has other women on the side.
When
but
she whispers,
I work on a
girls
train,
on the side.
And he is rich enough to be in the dining car,
right.
But I'm his girlfriend.
Or wife.
Like, what are you talking about? Like,
yelling at my TV. Like, it's so preposterous. And he just doesn't want to believe it.
Yeah, well.
Even the way Hillary has to say, officer. Like, he does.
I appreciate your being so, like, wowed, but I think a lot of women experience this. Where people
I know.
Do not. Even
the rage
today,
is in me.
So.
I know it is. I know.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty terrible. So overall, Alex, she has ups and downs in this, right? She has moments where it's like people are being nice, then she has these like horrific moments that are absolutely awful. Then there's like a little bit people are being nice, and then like, oh no, this is terrible. She is having to be saved a lot. I mean, she is very, very lucky for the kindness of strangers. I hope that what happens is our girl learns some lessons here. I hope that she is paying attention to like, how do you get through these things? And don't ask me right this second, what are these lessons she's supposed to learn? I'm not exactly sure, but I just really hope she has her eyes open and like doesn't like discard these experiences, but learns from them in some way and somehow comes out better for it.
You're a rich girl? Or you were not too rich anymore, though. Now you know what it's like.
I wasn't in need of it, Liz.
Sure you were. No royal family here, lady. In America, you gotta make it, marry it, or steal it. You ain't cut out for hard work. A bit too pure to steal, I think. But that face, maybe you can marry it, if you're lucky.
I'm already married.
Look how well he keeps you.
Like I said, I was robbed by a miserable excuse for a man who clearly embraces one of your pathways to success.
What's he do then, this husband?
His family runs a ranch.
Cattle. Be careful with cowboys, love. Treat their horses better than their ladies. Guess you're gonna learn to work after all.
With all due respect, you don't look like someone who should be giving advice.
Not giving advice, just explaining the world you now find yourself in. I hope you booked your turn passage. I don't think you have the grit for this place.
But you do?
I don't do things for me anymore. Doesn't matter if I have it. Only matters if they have it. You'll become a mother one day. You'll see. Mothers can endure anything.
Last week, we have the final interrogator telling Alex, America is not a place of hopes and dreams. It is a place of opportunities, and you need to work when you're here. Now we have Mary being played by Haley McFarland telling her, I don't think you've got the grit. You either have to marry it, make it, or steal it. And I don't think you've got the grit to make it. Everyone assuming, just based on her looks, that she can't hack it because she reeks of rich girl. You may knock down a peg, maybe. But it brings up a question that you and I specifically talked about last week about grit. And I was on the opinion that Alex does have the grit to make it. And I think the fact that she's still standing at the end of this episode shows that. But I'm curious how you think that this conversation played into the theme of making it in America on one hand, and then to our episode theme of motherhood, and there's nothing a mother wouldn't do or a parent wouldn't do, and whether or not they're connected, actually, the way Mary is connecting them here, it seems.
I do think that your grit increases when you have kids, in my opinion, because suddenly you have, these other little people to be protecting. And so you have this whole other willingness to sacrifice and be selfless for the benefit of your kids. So I think that whole lecture, fine, cool, Mary. I feel like this whole idea of I'm just going to tell you how the world works. A little part of me, and
there's
I'm
a lot of
being
people
a
offering
jerk.
her advice on how the world works. But we had the Irish girl in last week's episode, Collins, the one who was going to sleep her way to get into America. Mm-hmm. They all have advice for her. I just feel like in Mary's particular case, I feel like I'd be like, Mary, you're in the same freaking train car I am. I'm not sure that you are so much more advanced in figuring out how the world works. I would have a little bit of a pause of but I don't know if Alex is really in that motherhood bubble quite yet. At least they haven't had her have any moments. Think about celebrity couples when we see them on the red carpet, and whenever there's newlyweds or even people who are newly dating or whatever, the camera is always searching for that baby bump, right? They're always looking for all of the small gestures, the putting their hand on their stomach, the spouse maybe putting their hands around them in a protective, covering their midsection kind of way. At least in this episode, I didn't see anything like that. She wasn't putting her hands on her belly. It's really, really commonplace for the camera to watch the woman lay down on her side and then put her hand on her belly. That's universal for I'm worrying about my child. We actually haven't seen any buying signs for motherhood. Just
out of Alex
one,
yet.
And it comes at the end of this episode. So after she finally gets freed from the police and she watches from afar as Coffee Man gets hauled off, which is just the smallest amount of justice, she looks to her left and she sees Mary and her two little kids walking away very fast. And she realizes she has my things. And she chases after them, stops Mary and says, give me my things, give me my tips. And Mary says, right, Mary knows the game. She's like, oh, we were trying to find you. We lost track of you trying to find you. And Alex basically calls bullshit on her. And Mary says, she plays this card again, like she did in the cabin the night before. You'll see when you're a mother. And Alex, for the first time, Alex says, I already see. And then she touches her belly. It's the first TV sign that it's really shown us, other than the earliest scenes with Jennifer in the bed, about being a mother. She finally retorts back to Mary with the I already see. And Mary's like, oh.
I appreciate, but that's all good for the argument. I'm talking about buying signs with herself. As a viewer, we didn't see anything that said, I am crossing over that line of feeling like a mom. And for everybody, it's different. For my own self, I didn't want to know the gender of my twins. And so I was just I'm not going to know anything. And They were my first. And so I'm not going to act like I wasn't acting like I was pregnant. I was definitely giant and pregnant, but it didn't become real until I was in the hospital. They were preemies and they were doing an ultrasound and someone accidentally told me they were girls. And then I talked to them and I said, girls, like my girls. And that is a moment. And what I'm telling you as a mom, I didn't see her have those moments. I understand that she argued with Mary and she had that, like, I do know, so shut your mouth. But it wasn't quite the same as like this light bulb, I'm a mom, and like, I have to do this because I'm a mom. And it's funny, it's really funny. The beating of the guy, even, there would be like kind of a moment where you're like, oh my God, like you might pat your stomach after you went through that to be like, holy crap. Like I just did this like huge exertion of energy and like, and violence. Like you would like kind of physically check your belly. I know that sounds like kind of odd, but it's what you would do, like kind of patting yourself down, like, am I all okay? You would do that. And so I wonder in this moving forward, if she will, now that she's made this decree to Mary that like, this is it, I feel it. Will she start doing that? Will we start seeing some buying signs that, yes, I'm really a mom?
I agree with you. And I've also been waiting for the patting of the stomach or more of those signs, maybe because it's just TV and movies have definitely trained us. But, Mary is peeing the entire time. She's giving that little unsolicited advice to Alex. You can actually hear the tinkling at the start of the clip. It's really gross. She gets back in the bed and she's sleeping on the inside and she has her boys on the outside of her. And Alex lays down on her side and she leans over and looks down. She's clearly looking at the kids, but I thought this was going to be the moment where a hand would slide to her stomach since it was so on point about the situation. And she had finally eaten. She hadn't eaten in a day. Remember, because even at Ellis Island, she hadn't eaten. And this is the, I guess the next day, actually. So, yeah, just something. And there was nothing there. So maybe her conversation with the people you meet along the way, maybe her interaction with Mary, while not wonderful, maybe will trigger something in her where we'll start to see those buy signs more. We talked a little bit about the fact that the ticket didn't come with food. Man, I was really high on the Grand Central ticket, man. Especially compared to the Chicago one that we see at the end of this episode where he's like, no one goes to fucking Fargo in the winter and winter lasts until June. Like he was very nasty. How does that man not sell her the ticket with food in it?
Yeah. I wish if he was, going down like all the,
right. He tried the upside, about. Right. He tried to sell her the upside solo cabin.
Well, and even just like, telling her to be cautious about the money and giving her all these like tips and tricks. It's like, why'd you stop right before food? It was weird. It was weird not to even offer it.
Yeah. Or just be included with it. You would think it would just be included with the ticket.
Yeah.
It's $94 ticket or $82 ticket. Like,
it just seems like it would have been part of the conversation. But again, apparently there was no menu board or nothing for you to look up and see like, oh, these are where the trains are. Oh, these are where and I don't mean something fancy like electric, but I mean like even something handwritten that says like, if you want a train, this is how much it costs. If you want the whatever, here's like the food part. Nothing like that. This is back before consumer rights. Where stuff's supposed to be out, where you can see how much things cost.
One last thing about this, because we talked about this a little bit last week, and I was curious if you picked up on it. This was very little like micro facial expression-y things. The train manager says, well, if you're willing to work for it, we'll keep you fed. I can't give away their stuff for free, but we also can't have you starve. And Alex, she struggles for a second and then swallows a hard thank you. And she gets a thank you out of her throat. And I was wondering, why was the thank you so hard there? Was she really going to argue that she shouldn't have to work for the food? And then it made me think, Caroline, is this the kind of knock down a peg thing that we were talking a little bit about that maybe Alex needs to experience now in America? Is this an example of marry it, make it, steal it? Someone is giving you a kindness, not giving you for free. You got to say thank you for giving this opportunity.
Yeah. I think it is her starting to have to, bite her tongue a little bit, which is, something we said I'm kind of confused why she was like that arrogant, that through the entire boat process and Ellis Island process, she had plenty of like snotty remarks for people. Maybe this is her first moment of actually being like, yeah, I do need to be more grateful. It's weird to me because, I mean, just because you're wealthy doesn't mean you automatically have shitty manners. And so it kind of like surprises me that we're supposed to start feeling like she has terrible manners. But I'm just going with some sort of idea that it's not that as much as she's proven to be naive about how the rest of the world works. And I don't know. I mean, do we really think Alex thought that she should just be given food for free? Like, is that where?
No, that's
like,
what I'm saying. Maybe I
interpreted
the facial expression wrong. But if you watch it again, she looks like she's going to say something and then she doesn't. She swallows and then she says thank you. And so it made me think for a second, like, what was she going to say? Thank you wasn't her first reaction. I think that's clear. Whatever her first reaction was, it wasn't
though,
thank
are
you.
you vibing like an entitlement thing out of her? Or what are you vibing off of?
Maybe an unconscious entitlement. I think she has this idea of fairness that may not square with blue collar fairness in America in the 1920s.
Okay.
You know, where fairness is more about you get a shot to bust your ass for it. That's the limit of fairness in America in this entire time period. The pioneer spirit, right? You go back to 1883. Fairness was you're going to have an opportunity to try and go all the way north with your covered wagon. That's as far as we're going to guarantee you the opportunity to do it. Anything after that is on you. And that's fairness. And I think that may not be a concept that she's used to and maybe has to get used to. That's why I think I think this experience with this train and having to work for her food, and I think in a backhanded way, her conversation with Mary, I think are important experiences for Alex to have as she is preparing to go work on a ranch for the rest of her life, which is backbreaking, exhausting work.
And humbling. I mean, you can do things that, you know, you think are all right, and then you could have a snowstorm out of nowhere, or you could have a tornado, or you could have some sort of terrible, I mean, the dust was so bad recently out in Midland, like, some of our fellow oilmen were out there saying, like, you couldn't even see anything. It's just dust, you know? Like, we have things coming down the pike here for these people that, you know, is not going to look good. And you can do all the right things, make all the right choices, and crops can just not grow. You know, things can just not work right. Or cattle could get a virus and die.
Just to recap, in case people weren't paying attention, the train that she had booked to Fargo, remember, she's supposed to be going all the way to Billings on this train ticket she had originally bought, has been canceled because of the snow. How long does the snow last? Until it melts.
So shouldn't she get some money back?
You would think.
Or did she in the moment? I'm trying to think, actually, just because a portion was canceled.
I don't think we saw her getting money back. And I feel like when the guy says that train only had 7 tickets sold because no one goes to Fargo in the fucking winter, I think there was a little buyer beware here. That's why the man in Grand Central Station wouldn't even sell her a ticket all the way to Bozeman, because it was so uncertain. So I think it may be a no refunds. You journey at your risk that it may be canceled.
It's crazy, right?
It is. Well, no consumer rights in 1924.
And also, I'm sorry, were you like shocked that the train station man would say fucking to her?
That's what I'm saying. This is, I mean, I'm a proud New Yorker, and I found the Chicago man to be very on point for people from Chicago to my New Yorker self.
But a worker at the train station to a woman who he's like, obviously.
I agree with you. I found it very crass. It was not a great look. It was not a great look for the train people of this
thought it was just straight up odd. You are in customer service. Rarely do you see those people say fucking unless you're in an active fight. There was no active fight. There was nothing hostile going on.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
That was strange writing right then.
I thought it was some commentary on Chicago, but I also don't want to piss off any Chicago listeners that we have. So, hopefully things are turning up, at least like Paul said, at least a respite from the storm, and from her from her most recent experiences. So let's put a plug in Alex until we see episode 6 and what goes on there. Let's head to her beloved and pick up with Spencer sleeping under a tree.
You're pretty far from anything, and I don't see a horse.
Hop the train. Pick a poor spot to get off. Folks in the car didn't give me much choice.
You see any other lawmen come through here? With a priest?
What about an Indian girl about 16, traveling with 2 men?
You're the only people I've seen.
Where are you headed?
Montana.
Montana. That's where the lawmen are from. And the priest and the Indian girl. Sure are a lot of folks from Montana wandering around West Texas. And we don't get coincidences out here. Let's go.
Go where?
Amarillo? See if we can figure out who or what you're hiding from?
I'm not hiding from anything. I'm trying to get home.
Oh, if that's the truth. Your train ticket's on us.
All you're gonna do out here is die. You're 30 miles from water. If you ain't a fugitive, this is the luckiest thing that's ever happened to you.
Now, the first part of that clip, it was too long to play all of it, was talking about Hunter's very large guns and what he kills with it. And Marshall Fawcett's companions, who the scout is named Two Spears and her deputy marshal is Deputy Marshal Clint Patterson, just in case you're looking for character names. Both of them are talking about who are you that you were able to take on leopards and jaguars and live, and to the point where you have claws on bracelets for it. And this idea, I call this clip Hunter because I think it's setting up this first idea of Spencer is a dangerous man. He may not be a threat, but he is a dangerous man because he is still standing here and those big cats are not. It also kind of plays into later when Marshall Fawcett learns that he is a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Maybe there's a connection there that this man really is a killer, even if he's killing for our country. So it was kind of interesting. I gotta tell you, Caroline, I laughed hysterically when the deputy said, man, you picked off a bad spot to hop off the train. Again, why did he get off the train at all?
We said the same thing. We were like, what did he jump off there? That's hilarious. That's when I love it. We always joke around that the writers are like actually under all of our beds, all of our podcaster beds, and they listen to us and then they come back and change stuff.
I like the idea that they were like, someone's going to wonder why he got off the train, so we're going to make fun of him for getting off of it. Listen, if I'm Marshall Fawcett, I'm with her. That is too many people from Montana gathered in this very small area. What do you think she's even possibly thinking all of this is? Because I'm telling you, I think she is out for blood now for Marshall Kent and Father Renaud after watching what happened at that Comanche camp and seeing the massacre there from episode 3 of the season.
Well, so your question, what do I think that Mamie Fawcett thinks is going on? I don't think she knows, but I think that her intuition that this is too many people and too many coincidences and too many suspicious facts, like a young girl killed 5 people. Like if you were a law person, I think you would be like, that sounds like there's more going on there. Like across the board, it feels like she's only been giving like little bits of information. And I mean, obviously her interaction with Kent, please. I mean, he was so, dismissive and didn't even believe that she was an actual marshal or anything. The whole thing was like, come on. She was very suspicious of everything that was going on. And I think she's going to be a cooler head. She seems like somebody who, you're right, has compassion for the Native Americans who live there, have compassion for her constituents, if you will, and the people that she is supposed to be there to take care of.
Right. When Montana's all gone, she's going to be the one who has to still have relationships with these people, and they have to trust
and she
her.
actually seems to care about that quite a bit. And really wants to take care of everybody in her area, no matter what. So I think she's going to be a cooler head. I really hope she is. I hope she's somebody who can get to the facts and move things on.
If you guys are wondering where does the extra horse come from and why do they have the extra horse with them, you'll recall when they do go to the Comanche camp to check out the evidence from the massacre, and they learn about the fact that it was Marshall Kent and the other marshal at the time who was still alive at that point, and Father Renaud. They bring the horse, and the practice is to give the fallen's horse to their next of kin. And Fawcett says, well, we should go do that then. And Two Spears says they already did, meaning he is the next of kin. So that massacre very much struck him in a personal way because it was his family who was murdered, or among the murdered there. And that's why they're walking around with that horse, because he was given it as the gift of the fallen. He was the one to receive it. And it comes in super handy because otherwise, Spencer would be having his hands around the waist of one of the people on horseback. So there is some kind of level of trust here, right? Because they let him keep his rifle. They give him back his gun. They let him have a horse. He's not handcuffed. He's not riding into Amarillo handcuffed. He's just riding freely. So there is some level of trust here being exhibited by the marshal and her deputy and scout. So I thought that was a little interesting too, that maybe there was some instinctual professional camaraderie or something going on here, because I think we've seen plenty of people in this show who Marshall Kent certainly would have hogtied him and thrown him over the back of a horse rather than let him ride free with access to his weapons.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Let's we're advanced to the sheriff's office. Spencer's walking in, he walks in front of Marshal Fawcett, and he's walking with a purpose. He's walking with a very straight back. Caroline, to me, he seemed like a guy who was walking with the air of someone who knows he has not done anything wrong. And I was impressed by that, because we were talking in the last episode about how Spencer seems a little adrift and seems to also not have any of the bearings or discipline that someone who was in the military for so long would have. And here he seems very much like an officer. The way he's walking into the sheriff's office, and then once in the office, he stands at like attention. He puts his feet shoulder width apart, and he puts his hands behind his back just like he's at ease. It was very much like, oh, this is what Spencer looked like when he wasn't shooting people in the field, but when he was in the military. I thought it was like a slight personality change or some kind of switch in him clicked walking into this office.
Maybe it was kind of a little reality check here that he actually is going to need to act right. Because, I mean, he got all the way, the prohibition thing was all weird and on the run when you think about it. But this is like, he's actually in an office now, with presumably a jail and other things going on there. So I feel like if there was ever a time when you were going to snap to and show your best manners, he was at the moment when it was time to go ahead and do that.
I thought there was a lot of odd attention being paid to the construction going on at the sheriff's office. The scene begins with Marshal Fawcett talking to one of the deputies up front about how they added a lobby in the last year. And then as we're making our way back to Sheriff Hutchinson's office, we see workers like painting and literally building out the back. It was interesting to me. Was it just a commentary that maybe this area was being settled, that this wasn't necessarily the wild frontier anymore. It was actually becoming more of a metropolis. I mean, Amarillo is, as far as cities go, is a metropolis. It covers and it's growing here. And clearly there's people moving into this area. And the sheriff mentions that roughnecks are a, quote, new level of rascal, more wild than cowboys. I thought new level of rascal is a phrase I'm going to have to start using on people. What did you think? There was a little Gilmore Girls joke here for you.
Oh, the Winchester Mystery House always makes me laugh. That's for all you Gilmore Girls fans. If you don't remember, there's a scene when Luke continuously is fixing up things at Lorelei's house when he should be going home to Nicole, but he doesn't. And she says, "You're spending all your free time working on the Winchester Mystery House." And I thought you all would laugh at that. So that's your Gilmore Girls moment.
And if you don't understand the reference, which I had to look up because I remember.
You had to look it up?
I did. I vaguely was aware of it. And I remember the Gilmore Girls quote because at your urging, I did watch actually Gilmore Girls several times all the way through, but I still had to look it up. So the Winchester Mystery House is a mansion in San Jose, California. It was once the residence of Sarah Winchester, who was the widow of firearms magnate William Wirt Winchester. That's why they're joking her, Marshal Fawcett and Sheriff Hutchinson back and forth about sending people to the Winchester house, with Winchester guns. But the house became a tourist attraction 9 months after Sarah Winchester's death in 1922. She was known to rebuild and abandon construction if the progress did not meet her expectations. She often took the direct lead on being the architect and doing the designs herself. In the end, because there was so much start and stopped construction, it resulted in a maze-like design. In the San Jose News of 1897, it was reported that a 7-story tower was torn down and rebuilt 16 times. As a result of all the different kinds of expansions and constructions, there are many walled-off exterior windows and doors that were just not removed as the house grew in size. Multiple levels, up to 5 levels, were added to different parts of the home. The design was essentially Victorian, but also had Gothic elements and Romanesque features. Winchester, this was an ongoing project. She would often take breaks from construction on a regular basis to rest, sometimes for months. It slowed construction considerably, and there were rumors that she essentially was constantly rebuilding and building the house for 38 years, all the way until she died in 1922. Just someone who was not just moving couches around or changing out pillows, but someone who was just never done. She just kept
building on.
She just kept building on.
If you look at a picture of it, it looks very Dr. Seussy. Like, it's just built on, built on, built on, built on.
At the largest, the house had approximately 500 rooms. So the Winchester Mystery House, which is allegedly haunted, of course, of all the people that Winchester guns have killed, as well as the many workers and people who came and went during the years and years of construction. So I guess if you're ever around San Jose, go check out the old Winchester Mystery House, or stop by the Amarillo Sheriff's Office. Apparently they're all the same. I thought there was a really funny thing here about the switchboard operators. There's 2 switchboard operators. The one that's in Montana, immediately kind of salty and snippy off of the, out of the gate for really no reason. And, Sheriff Hutchinson, gives a little advice and says, you don't want to piss off the switchboard operators, essentially is what he's saying, that they can be a little salty. But this clip, this quote that, Marshall Fawcett gives, I think really is the definition of the internet. So I just want to play it real quick. So another little soundbite for you.
Impudence rides side saddle with anonymity.
If you've ever been on the receiving end of a harsh review or some kind of anonymous internet chat with a keyboard warrior, I think the phrase that impudence rides side saddle with anonymity really rings true. So
it's a good one.
Yeah, it made me laugh. It made me laugh a lot. But let's get to the meat of this. So we finally get Sheriff McDowell in Bozeman on the phone because the county is Gallatin and they have a sheriff, not the town of Bozeman, which has a police chief. Let's take a listen to a little bit. Once Sheriff McDowell gets over his misogyny, which granted isn't as bad as Marshall Kent's, but still disappointing for a man that I think we all generally like to have such a hard time believing there are female marshals. Let's take a listen to their meat of their conversation.
Do you know Spencer Dutton?
I know him well.
Do you vouch for him?
Marshal, well, that's a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient.
President vouched for him.
You won a Medal of Honor?
Not that I'm aware of.
He doesn't know about any medal.
Well, he received it just the same. Let me talk to him.
What are you doing in Texas?
I'm coming home.
You taking the scenic route, huh?
The men who killed my brother.
Where are they? Are they still free?
Now you listen to me.
You better stay in Texas if your plan is coming back here and starting a war.
As far as I know, war's already started.
And you ain't stopped it.
Winter stopped it, son.
Winter's over.
Not up here, it ain't.
Tell my aunt I'm coming home.
Can you do that?
Before you do anything, you
come over here and see me first thing, understand? This is not the place you left.
Tell her.
And the next clip is the phone dangling by the side. Sheriff McDowell doesn't even have time to hang it up before he's running out the door. But Caroline, talk to me about this scene. I know you had a strong reaction to Spencer's behavior here.
I just wanted Spencer to be more excited that this is actually coming together. Like, people are starting to understand who he is, and there's someone who's willing to vouch for him. And the whole I don't know, he had such a surly attitude. Now, we don't know anything about what his relationship to, our good friend in Bozeman really is. Maybe they had no relationship. Maybe they seriously had a relationship. It sounds like kind of some snippiness between them. I am surprised by all of those things. Every bit of this conversation, which felt like it should have been an old friend. Thank God somebody finally knows who I am and can finally vouch for me. kind of felt very uncomfortable and like it could go sideways at any time.
He starts off a little snippy too. He's like, he said, I'm coming home. He's like, you're taking a scenic route. Dude,
that's what I mean. Like, there's some bad blood. Like, something went on with these guys.
Maybe, John Sr. stayed behind. I don't know if he served in the war, but he was definitely working the ranch with his uncle. And Spencer went to Africa and became a big game hunter and has not been home apparently since the war ended because he doesn't know he won the Congressional Medal of Honor. Maybe there is some bad blood. Maybe there are some people, we really haven't focused on what does returning home mean for Spencer.
Yeah. Like, is there going to be a bunch of judgment?
Yeah. Maybe people aren't so happy with the fact that the war's been over for 5 years at this point and he hasn't been home.
I think that's a good thing for us to pick up on that. Like, as much as Kara is very excited and really wants him home, that may not be the case for everybody. And that's not something that I thought about. This entire time, I thought that it was only going to be an exciting homecoming. But I mean, when we really lay it out like this, that like it has been a while, he has been basically like gallivanting around while the ranch could have really used him. He may be getting some side eye from people when he comes into town.
Now, initially, I bristled a little bit, and I was going to bring this up as a real gotcha moment that he says twice, tell my aunt I'm coming home. Can you do that? And he says, you come by here first. This is not the same place you left. And he says, tell her. And then he hangs up and gives back the phone. He doesn't say, tell my uncle and aunt that I'm coming home. Just Kara he's focused on. But then I was going back in my head. I thought I had a real gotcha moment here. There is bad blood, and even maybe, Jacob is pissed off. But if you remember, it's the note after the attack that kills his brother and leaves Jacob full of bullet holes. She says in the letter, by the time you reach this, your brother is died. Your brother is dead. He was killed. And by the time you get this, your uncle probably will be dead too. And that's one of the last letters he gets. He may just be assuming Kara's there by herself, which may be even part of his urgency. He may be thinking that he's going home. He doesn't have, it's him and Kara and his wife if she ever shows up. And little Jack, he doesn't know about Elizabeth. Well, maybe he knows about Elizabeth from the letters, but, no Jacob there. So he probably feels like he's racing home very much to assume the man of the house role. So it's going to be interesting to see how they interact, because he doesn't seem like someone who's going to play very nicely to Jacob having orders to give. And as the elder statesman of the house, Jacob's going to have an opinion. And Spencer
may not want to play second fiddle to Alpha Jacob.
Yeah, right. Spencer is also going to have some violent opinions, I think, of his own, born of his PTSD in war and his experiences getting home, to say nothing of his brother being dead and not getting to say goodbye. His older brother, too, not even, which has its own kind of, he's the last. He's the last of his mother, father, and older brother. So, and sister who he never even got to know, Elsa. So I want to zoom in on the come by and see me. This is not the place you left. We talked about this last week, and we were joking a little bit about how the show, from Spencer's point of view, is about his journey, not about the destination. And he was struggling in last episode when he was in the back of that police car, looking listless and looking off. And when they were talking about prohibition, and he takes it to the direction of there were no power lines, there was no prohibition, there were no paved roads. Spencer's struggling with this idea of this is not the place I left. And he already understands that. And McDowell makes that a very real concept. Again, I'm curious what you thought of that, because we picked up on it last week, but also how do you think that's going to play out when he actually does get back to Bozeman?
I think there's going to be a huge adjustment period because he's not ready to play chess. He's not ready to sit down and figure out with Jacob like strategic moves. I think he wants to go mow everybody down. And this is a little bit more of a society. Everything's not perfect because, things are still being like sort of invented, and we're sort of creating this more civilized city life and whatnot. But I mean, out in the country, there's still some sense of like, we don't want to just go do that. That's something that Kara was like pushing on him. Like, we don't want to just go do that. I don't know if Spencer knows any other way, though. He's never been a diplomat with a leopard, I don't know if he knows how to come in here and do anything but blast everybody.
Right. He didn't really beat around the bush with McDowell. He says, are the men who killed my brother free? You didn't do anything to stop them. I'm coming home and I'm going to kill them. And McDowell knows immediately you're going to start a war.
can't even believe he said all of it and like really, implied that this is what I'm coming to do. This is what I'm going to do.
We played a little bit of the clip from episode 106 last week because it's where McDowell learns about Jacob and being shot and the attack on them that kills John Sr. And McDowell says, Wyoming had a range war. I will not let a range war come to Montana. And Jacob growls, snarls at him. He's like, the war's already here. So I think Jacob and Spencer are probably very much approaching this from the same point of view, though, again, I think two generals, may be locking horns. But McDowell's not going to he's barely been able to keep Jacob at bay from starting a war. The springtime cometh and bringeth Spencer witheth. The rivers are going to flow red with blood. I think that's the only way this ends. So just another hitting of this is not the place you left, because I think that's going to become an important theme for Spencer as we go forward in the rest of this season. Let's take a listen. This is his last interaction.
Need to stow that for you?
Rifle stays with me.
We've got policies against...
I don't give a shit about your policies. Rifle stays with me. What happened to this country? What other rules were made when I was killing for this place?
Fair. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't say, I'm a Medal of Honor winner, since he knows that knowledge now. But
also,
we experienced this, though. This is Vietnam vets, right? They came back to a country they didn't recognize and that did not want them. Is Spencer in for the same kind of reception? Yes, Kara asked you home, but...
I don't understand why he's not held to the rules. Why did they just let him on?
Because that man is like, he's just here taking tickets. He doesn't have an answer to the rules. No, you're right.
Because I'm like, well, there's no police officers that hang around anywhere near train stations. There's nothing there.
We talked about this last week. You remember we were talking about how he was walking on the side of the road carrying a gun, a very obvious long gun rifle.
That part I have less of an issue with, because there should be no rule about just walking with a gun in the country.
Right. But the cop made a point of the vagrant with a gun is something that we take care of here in Fort Worth. And to Spencer, that's crazy talk, and all of this, he's like, I live in Montana. I have a gun with me.
But I get it on his side, but it doesn't actually push the agenda that the world has changed if he's allowed to just get on the train with the gun.
Maybe the fact that it was even asked. It's not Chicago. It's not New York. It's not one of the Boston. It's not one of, or Philly. It's Amarillo. It's the Panhandle. Like, everyone probably has a gun on that train.
I don't know why everyone wouldn't have a gun, just generally speaking, because, it seems like at any given time, you have no guarantee that you're making it home that night. Like, I don't care who you are or where you're at.
Right. There is a line in Landman from this season where he's talking to the lawyer, the city slicker lawyer, Rebecca, and she's like, I want you to know that I have a license to conceal carry in the state. And Billy Bob says to her, everyone carries. You don't need a license to carry conceal. Yeah. He's like, we wave at each other because we all are fucking armed in our cars. That's why we wave at each other when we drive by, because we all know we have guns. So.
Because we all know we have guns, we wave at each other. That's what he said?
He said we all wave at each other when we drive because we all have guns in the car and we know it. But this idea of, why do the rules apply? I think he's offended that he's even being that rule even exists, let alone enforced. The fact that it exists.
I understand Spencer's side. Stop telling me what Spencer thinks. I know what he thinks. If the argument is society has changed and you haven't, and you are going to have to face consequences for things in society that you didn't have to face before, if that is the thesis, then it feels stupid to encounter a rule that Spencer can just walk right through, and it has no bearing.
Maybe the fact that they even have that rule is the change. They haven't gotten to enforcing it yet when someone yells or growls.
We just say it's the rule. Gotcha.
Because maybe in Chicago or maybe in New York, that same train person says it, and maybe there is someone that enforces it because it's quote unquote civilized, But here, maybe the fact that they have it is as far as the change has gotten. They actually haven't gotten it. If you growl at me loud enough, or you bark at me, or you just walk by me, I'm not gonna, it's like security in a store, most of them aren't actually going to steal you for shoplifting. They're there to deter you, not to enforce the rule.
Steal you? What does that mean?
If you're trying to steal like clothes, a lot of
they're
security,
not going to detain you? Is that what you
right?
mean?
A lot of right. Yeah, a lot of security, they're told not to actually detain customers. So it's an idea of deterrence, not enforcement. So I don't know. Maybe that's,
Okay, I'll go with you on all this.
But I think we're supposed to see it from Spencer's point of view, but you make a very good point though of why have this rule if you're just going to let them walk all over.
Why make the point 2 seconds before that society is not the same anymore and you're going to be subjected to like rules you're not used to and then not subject them to the rule. That's all. But you know what? I'm so relieved that Spencer got on a train heading the right direction that I don't even care. I don't care at all. I just want him on a train in the right direction, sitting in a seat, not in the back, not rolling around with 3 ne'er-do-wells, but actually sitting in a seat, ready to go with all his stuff. I mean, this is as good as it's gotten for Spencer. He's being treated like a human.
What do we think we're doing? Everywhere's America. Everywhere used to be our country. Not one of us ever escaped. Chief Joseph couldn't. Geronimo couldn't. How could we do it?
They could have escaped. But they wouldn't leave their people behind. We'll make it because we're out of people to leave behind. Because we're the last ones still fighting.
So I think this is circling back around a little bit to what you and I were talking about last week of how far do you run before you just stand and turn? And it feels like Running Horse, like I was talking last week, like I really identify him here. As long as there is land to run towards, I'm going to keep running while my daughter is with me. And I think Tiona is coming around a little bit to your point of view. I don't know if you took it from there, but this idea of we can't escape. So let's just make a stand. What are we doing?
I just know Texas very well, and I know all the areas that they are starting to travel, and it's just very flat and very wide open, and I just don't see how they're going to be able to hide. I mean, they're going to have to be so far ahead, never stop. I worry for them. I really worry for them because I want this to work out for Tiona so badly. I want there to be some way that she makes it to whatever equals safety, which I don't even know what that is because I think it would be wrong for us to say that safety equals another reservation or...
Clearly not. I mean, the Comanches are a testament to that. What happened to them?
But I mean, it's like you could keep going reservation to reservation. Like I don't know what the definition of safety is for her. And I don't know if simply by getting older and aging a little and I don't know, looking less like your picture. I don't know at what point you could stop being scared and feeling like you have to keep running.
Watching this and thinking about the reward, the $250 reward for her, which by the way is about $4,500 in today money is what the reward being offered for her is. I really started actually for the first time to think about and see your point of view of how far do you run? Because you're right. It just becomes reservation to reservation. Even if you go to Mexico, even if you do make it north and then west into New Mexico and then south into Mexico, which is what Runs His Horse's plan is. They're on the plains there, the Llano Estacado. And that's what Anders the cowboy says, in the beginning of the scene. He's like, if they went north, they picked the wrong way. There ain't a goddamn tree to hide behind, and there's no water either. Like they went the wrong way if you're still trying to hide. And I started thinking to myself, killing them, right? Outrunning where the posters have gotten to, which Amarillo is spoiled, but maybe somewhere else in the destination. But also with that is you have to get rid of Father Renaud and Kent, or at least Kent.
So I kept trying to think about that because you're right. If it's just
because it ends with them, presumably
3 versus these 2, then okay. I honestly really do believe that Tiona's group has, as far as I'm concerned, the advantage. I think that they can do better on the land than these 2 guys can, and I think that they can figure out some sort of ambush or some way to hide better than these guys can.
Well, not anymore.
But I feel like they have more skills, okay? More survival skills is what I'm trying to say, okay?
Yeah.
But the school knows that Father is gone, So it's not going to end with his death, because even if he never comes back, the school still knows, so they could just send out more people, you know?
That's true.
And then the fact that they've already told Mamie the story, then now I'm like, on the law side, it doesn't end with Kent because somebody else knows about it too. So I'm like, where could it possibly end? How many people do have to die, or how much do you have to do in order to get any type of reasonable closure on this? I don't have the answer at all.
Like Banner, there's a small piece of me that feels like watching the violence done by Kent in these last few episodes, even going into the saloon in the beginning of this episode where he doesn't want to do, he's reading his Bible standing outside the saloon. There's a part of me that is thinking that Father Renaud maybe is at a point that if the opportunity to just wash his hands of her is given, that he may be willing to do that. And so that maybe the obstacle to freedom here is actually just getting rid of Kent.
Why do you feel that way? What leads you to believe that?
The uneasy relationship between Marshall Kent and Father Renaud, basically since they teamed up, but every single episode, I think in this season, has shown some uneasy alliance between the two of them. And the way the show is portraying it, it almost is like Father Renaud is the bigger of the two people. Now, yes, he convinces the cowboy, who I believe is C. Thomas Howell playing Anders, the cowboy, a pony boy from The Outsiders.
Yeah.
I liked how reluctant he was to give up the location and admit that he was riding with Tiona and runs his horse and Pete. But when the priest corroborates the story, he is the only one to ask the important question of, all right, she killed these two nuns in their sleep. Why? Why did she kill the two nuns?
I love that. I really love that because
I really loved it too.
It actually shows people being reasonable. Like, You're not going to turn me on a child in this situation. Like, you need to explain what were the circumstances and how in the world would it get to this point? I mean, this is crazy. You're telling me you're searching after essentially, if you're looking at this and you're the age these men are, this is like a little girl, Jeez Louise.
She did this? All right.
Really
and then she did
that.
do it, but why? People just don't do this. Now, Father Renaud's response to that is, she's evil. All right. That's a religious guy's response, but he doesn't say it with a ton of conviction. Comparatively, listen to Kent's side of the story, and I couldn't even bring myself to cut the clip because I was so nauseated about it. He calls her an animal, says she's a bridge between animal and man, that her and her people never evolved to get out of their caves and get off their land because they interacted with nature. He says some really vile shit in that scene, which I think makes Anders' stomach turn. Even though he thinks Darwin is a quack, like listening to Kent's words and the violent vitriol, like horrible things. It's personal. And he says, like a wolf only lusts for the kill, and like a wolf needs to be erased from the planet. Kent is unhinged. And I think by association, I think the show has done little micro things to show that Father Renaud, in the example of Kent, is doing a little bit of how they have killed so many more people than the 5 that Tiona allegedly killed. So many more people. I think they're up to at least 15.
Many more innocent people. Let's really really capitalize it.
All innocents.
These people were not trying to do anything, and they were just caught in the crossfire here. And they didn't have any problem being cruel and merciless. So.
And remember, Father Renaud did not consider the nuns innocents. He considered them holy women, and he definitely considered Tiona in the wrong and evil for what she did. But think back to season 1 when Tiona and the sister are in his office. He beats the shit out of the sister. He breaks her hands and stuff. He takes a measure of punitive justice out on her for what she did to Tiona, as much as also then hurting Tiona for what she did. I feel like there is an aspect here, and maybe I'm looking too hard into the sand for this, but I feel like there's an aspect of Kent being so unhinged and Father Renaud having to be in his presence and see these acts. If he is truly a man of God who is being objective about what are we doing, we have lost the thread. Look at those we have killed. I think there's a little piece here where he is willing to let it go because of fear that he may lose himself as a godly man, which for all of his bluster and bullshit, I think is important to him. whether it is sincere, whether it is real, that from how we view it, I think he thinks himself a godly man of God. And if it comes to push that Kent goes too far, and maybe already has, maybe he just doesn't even want any more of it. Think about how this episode ends, right? So never split up, right? I'm sure you were yelling at the television when these dummies decided to split up so Pete could go look for water.
I understand that Pete needed to go look for water. This is where the survival portion comes in, where, like I said, like they would think of that first. Like Spencer didn't think of that. They're more in tune that like we don't have, that much time and we haven't seen water in a while. They're paying a lot more attention. I don't know what the right thing is. I mean, obviously,
you go together. They're just going to be standing. There's no tree for them to hide under, so you at least go together.
That's true. Pete's been out on his own, though. That's the only difference that I feel like. Pete has been out on his own and has successfully come back and been fine, or even had gotten into scuffles and came back and healed up and was okay. So I don't know. Do you take the whole group when you're going to go look for supplies?
You have to. On this plane, when there's nowhere to hide, it's not like there was a little ravine or even a cave or some kind of bluff with high grass where they could have stowed them. Then, you know what? All right. Then 2 stay hidden instead of 3 moving together. But the base of his logic is, I'm just one Native American. They're looking for 3 and they don't know what I look like. Dude, you're a Native American in the middle of nowhere. There's no reservation
where they're looking
here.
For people.
You think they're going to be like, oh, the numbers don't work. There's only 1. He must not be related. No, come on. And once his horse knows better. I'm so upset that they did that. You know what? Maybe the episode doesn't turn out better, but maybe it does, because maybe then it is numbers. Maybe it is 3 on 2. But this episode ends with Pete being run down. His horse was already exhausted, tumbles. I couldn't even watch that. I had to close my eyes. Why? I don't like seeing horses hurt. That horse flipping over and tossing Pete. And then it ends with his war cry and 3 gunshots. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine Pete's making it out of this. When he promises Tiona that he's going to come back, I was like, I just threw up my hands. I was like, oh, well, that's it. You never promised to come back in a TV show. And then the whoop, and then the 3 gunshots. I don't even want to start the episode 6 to watch, because I can't even deal with it. Why did you split up? It was such a bad plan. This has gone off the rails. You had done such a good job of hiding for so long, and it all fell apart in a day.
It did. But you know what? That's where I was coming down to, like, I'm worried they're getting too exhausted. I'm worried that at some point you've got to just stop running and stop and turn and fight. And I know that all sounded crazy, but at the same time, look what's happening. They're starting to deteriorate. They're starting to make bad decisions. They're starting to have to make bad decisions, which, just... that makes me laugh. There's these reels that say, like, if you see a crocodile, make sure you scream and the little kids go, ah. It's very funny to me. I know, it's silly, but that's how I felt when I see this. I'm like, when you see a character make a mistake, listen to me scream, ah.
No, I'm right there with you. I mean, I shake my fist like I'm in some kind of weird theater.
I'm saying that completely wrong. So for all of you who know the actual words of the little song, I apologize for butchering it. Don't write it and say, like, Caroline's an idiot. She's not singing it right.
No one should be writing in to say Caroline is an idiot.
Well, I appreciate that, but please, on the children's song, I was a teacher for a very long time. I should know the song, but I never heard the song. The part is new to me.
I don't know it at all either. So,
oh goodness.
All right, let's
finish
up.
So overall, I'm scared. I'm scared. I think that Tiona's group is tired. I think all of our travelers are exhausted. And you know what? To be fair, I think Kent is tired too. And so as much as I'm not defending this man, he is making less and less rational decisions. His ability to just
something triggered when they rode into that camp.
He lost his mind. He lost his mind
lost
completely.
His damn mind from that point and hasn't been the same since. He had been more like, all right, this is a woman you're saying killed, things. And, I saw your cemetery, and almost seemed like the rational one of the group. And it has gone completely round the bend since then. Since this season began, has been a different character than the one I think that we saw in season 1. But then, no, because he's the one who, for no reason, killed Tiona's grandmother and then made up a cockamamie story. Actually, we have seen the bloodlust from him.
No, I do agree, but it's like coming faster.
Yeah.
And more.
Like it's coming to a head. Right.
Yeah, because when the grandmother thing happened, we were all like, oh, when everything happened more recently, we're like, yep, that's what Kent's gonna Kent.
Right.
You know, and do that.
So let's say the things don't work out well for Pete, right? You have two people bearing guns down on him. So I can't see how it does. The number advantage is gone. Now you have Renza's horse and Tiona, and you have Kent and Father Renaud, and they can't be very far from each other because Pete wasn't supposed to ride very far to go look for water without coming back. So they have to be pretty close to each other. And we now have Fawcett is out there somewhere in the Amarillo Plains, and Spencer is presumably on a train somewhere going through there soon. We have to be reaching ahead. A definitive need to finish this storyline one way or another. Head has to come. We have to be coming to the head, I would think.
You're like the head. The head is coming to the head.
The head. I couldn't think of what the phrase was. So. Let's go up to the train station. We pick up where we left off last week, where Banner, the livestock commissioner, Trader, the big ginger, and one of other Banner's henchmen, they're musing over what Christy, the sex worker, did to deserve this sad death. And everyone is they're thinking drugs, but not Banner. Banner suggests, and this is another towards a little pebble towards the redemption arc for Banner, and maybe having second thoughts of being in bed with Whitfield. Banner suggests, maybe blasphemously, that she didn't do anything wrong to deserve this fate. And when he says, what a waste, and they toss her down the ravine, man, it hits home how little life is valued by certain characters in this show. I don't know how you felt during the scene. I don't know if the scene registered for you at all in any kind of way, but it was depressing.
Again, if the prostitution storyline somehow makes Banner feel different and start to become disgusted with the behavior and all that stuff, then okay for this freaking storyline. I just need it to matter. I've said this over and over again. I just need it to matter. I really don't want this to just be like, this was like the for color part, you know, of just understanding his personality. Like, I don't need that. So I was happy to see that it affected Banner, and I'm glad that maybe he'll carry that with him and feel badly and start to question what he's doing with Whitfield.
And the very last thing, because we have to talk about it, just to say that we talked about it, we see Lindy. She's in town. She recruits. I believe this person's name will be Mabel. I believe this is Virginia Gardner playing this role of Mabel is going to be her character name. I was sussing that out by process of elimination, looking at the credits. Another sex worker working the street. She gives her the offer of, I have a British client who likes some quote unquote theater in the bedroom, and recruits her to be the new second. This will not end well. The whole thing was icky because of we know what's involved on the other side of that. This scene do anything for you other than just put dread and grossness in your belly?
Nope. You know, I was screaming the whole time, like, no, yeah. I don't want any of this to be happening.
Take this for what you will. Over this scene in the background, there is music spilling out from the speakeasy, which they're standing right outside of. And if you listen, the song is You Can't Keep a Good Man Down, which is from Mamie Smith. And actually, you can listen to it on Spotify. If you pull up Mamie Smith Volume 1, songs recorded 1920 to 1921, you can actually hear this old-timey song, You Can't Keep a Good Man Down. I believe it's track 2 on there. Interesting phrase for these two ladies kind of joining forces to go entertain Whitfield of You Can't Keep a Good Man Down. Who is the good man being kept down? If we're going to look for metaphors and everything. So
I don't know. We're going to have to put a pin in that. Ask our listeners, you guys, who could they possibly be referencing? Because I'm not sure. I want to think it's like Spencer, but it seems like we're too far away from that.
On the Facebook group, I'm going to put a little bit of information about the evaluation of the French franc after World War I, and also about Adolfo de la Huerta and his aborted attempt at overthrowing the president and the surrender of his troops in March of 1924. No reason to go into that now, but I did want to say from the Department of Defense's website, this is the distinction of what earns you a Medal of Honor, in case you're wondering. It is the nation's highest military award for valor. It is presented by the president in Congress's name. By law, only U.S. service members who distinguish themselves, quote, through conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, end quote, may receive the Medal of Honor. So when you think about Spencer, he is someone that, at least according to the president, exhibited conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life.
Well,
above
that's
and beyond
very
the call of
fancy.
duty.
And of course, what we would expect out of Spencer. That doesn't shock me that he would do that. But I don't know. It didn't seem to matter to him. So we'll have to see if it helps him get any further along.
I don't know, Caroline, 3 hours left. I'm still uneasy that even if he makes it home in the next episode, do we have a conclusion to this storyline? Any of these storylines that feels good. I really feel like we need to get a season 3 or some really epic long episodes. So I don't know. I'm a little spoiled on a character's name coming up in episode 7, which I don't even want to say here. But I'm not, but it's available for anyone to go see. It's just some bad IMDbing.
Go check it out if you guys want to.
If you're itchy, go look at episode 7 IMDb. Because I was looking for characters' names and actors' names. So, all right, that's going to do it for this week, I think. Caroline, what you got this week for listener reviews?
I wanted to say thank you so much to my brethren in Lithuania, because I am 100% Lithuanian. And right now, this podcast is trending #1 in Lithuania. And I am so happy. Sveikas, guys. I love that you are listening, and please continue. Please give us some feedback. I'd love to I'd love to read what you guys are thinking right now. It would be amazing. So thank you guys so much for listening.
And I also want to thank not only our Lithuanian friends, but this podcast is currently charting in the top 50 of, like, I think the last count I had was 37 different countries and charts. That's because of you guys. That's because of you guys listening to us and, presenting our long theories and long breakdown episodes. And, there are many podcasts covering Yellowstone. There are many podcasts out there in the world to listen to. So, I just want to say thank you all for listening. I very much appreciate it. I know Caroline, does too. We put a lot of work into these episodes and researching them, recording them, editing them, and getting them out to you. So thank you for taking the time to listen and make this a popular podcast.
This is Caroline.
And this is Mike. Thank you for listening to the Yellowstone Podcast 1923 edition. If you wouldn't mind heading over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review. It helps in promotion of the show, and it makes things like Apple put us in the most popular TV review podcast, which is currently where this little podcast is sitting. That's because you guys listening leave us some feedback. We'd love to interact with you on Instagram. We're on Twitter, formerly X, formerly known as Twitter. You reach us at podclubhouse.com. We would love to hear from you and hear your theories about what you think is going to happen in the final 3 hours of this series.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.